You're watching the next part of World Insight, and our next part brings us to our next story. For that, we're going to cross over to Iraq. Lots of headline stories out there always, but especially so this week, where twin suicide bombings in Baghdad killed more than 150 people. That's now become known as Bloody Sunday. That's how it's remembered in the minds of the Iraqis, just as another explosion in August that killed 100 people later became known as Bloody Wednesday. The question we ask you now is this: how many of these days will the Iraqis have to endure before peace finally comes to them?
Baghdad is mourning. In the Shiite stronghold, family, friends and relatives hold a funeral procession for 3 members of one family.
3 people were killed: a man, his wife, and his brother. This is the result of the government struggle over power.
2 suicide bombs tore through Baghdad last Sunday, killing 155 people and wounding more than 500. Mangled bodies and cars filled the street. In an unusual move, Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki soon arrived at the scene, promising to bring the terrorists to justice. The number of bombings and killings has fallen in the past 2 years, and the Prime Minister has been claiming credit. For a man who staked his political future on making Iraqis safe, with every bomb the militants come closer to toppling him at the polls. And the new attack has brought Iraqis back to the bad old days.
We don't know why they occur. We don't know what the aim behind them is. Did they aim at harming the Iraqi people? Is there anyone making use of them? I hold the officials responsible.
Critics complain that some of the key officials charged with security are more engaged in the January election than in running the country. And one Chinese analyst says the situation could be worse.
Some local media suggest that there are people inside the government who don't want Prime Minister Maliki to gain popularity before the election. It's because they might run against him in the coming race. And this is reflected in reports about insiders being involved in the blast.
On Thursday, Iraq arrested dozens of security officials over the bombings. For the Prime Minister, promising justice could be as hard as promising peace. On Monday, an al-Qaeda-linked group claimed responsibility for the bombings. It also claimed responsibility for the August bombings of 2 government ministries in Baghdad, when more than 100 people were killed. But a video that was released shortly after the August 19th attack suggests a different story.
A month ago, Satam Farhan, who is my party official in Syria and a member of the Ba'ath Party command in Syria, called me and asked me to conduct a bombing operation to shake the administration, and he told me that he has organized the operations.
This time, officials are again pointing at the Sunni-based Ba'ath Party.
About the investigation, we have now said that there is a coordination between the Qaeda and the Ba'ath groups. That's what we have said. Now they have planned and then gave a support, logistic support for carry out this accident.
Iraq's Sunni minority have long been dissatisfied with the post-invasion Shiite-led government. And disunity among their political leaders and the sheer force of Shiite numbers threatened to derail their hopes. 3 years ago, Iraq descended into intense violence when Sunni extremists launched bombing campaigns that aggravated the underlying factional tensions. Now, mainstream Sunnis seem willing to seek what they want through the ballot box in a nationwide vote scheduled for January. But analysts caution that fringe al-Qaeda-linked groups could play off the simmering Sunni fear, especially if the election proves bad for Sunnis.
逊尼派不接受战后伊拉克的秩序和现状，
Sunnis, who make up 20% of the overall population, have never accepted their status as a minority after generations as the politically dominant group in Iraqi society. They lost that status when the US-led invasion toppled Saddam Hussein and propelled the Shiites, who make up an estimated 60% of the population, into power.
While the attacks place much pressure on Maliki, the U.S. keeps its distance from the Prime Minister. Barack Obama last week reassured Maliki that all American combat troops would be gone in less than 2 years.
That is consistent with the transition that has been taking place, and I re-emphasized my commitment to Prime Minister Maliki that we will have our combat troops out of Iraq by August of next year, and all of our troops out of Iraq by 2011. What is wonderful about this...
But is this good news or bad news? 4 months ago, fireworks lit the sky in Baghdad to celebrate the first National Sovereignty Day. But 4 months later, the American Free Street is again an easy target for terrorists. The continuing presence of 120,000 American soldiers still underpins security, though they stopped patrolling the streets in July. News agencies record more than 10 explosions caused by car bombs, mines and explosives have shaken Baghdad in the past 2 months. The wave of violence has raised doubts about whether Iraqi forces can guarantee security.
There are checkpoints every 100 meters along the street. If they're working, how did these vehicles come? Why did the government not take this thing into consideration and work on an investigation?
And a few blocks away, a bold move raises more doubts. Back in August, Maliki announced the removal of protective concrete blast walls in Baghdad. Days after Bloody Sunday, the removal continues.
The concrete slabs should stay in place. It is not secure enough to remove them. And you saw what happened yesterday in Al-Salhiya near the Baghdad provincial government's building.
Tough as it seems, Professor Lee says Iraqis have to stand on their own.
Obama is moving US troops out of Iraq against all odds. So it is up to the Iraqis to carry on with the political process. Once started, there is no turning back. So the urgent task is for the caretaker government to get used to the situation. The faster, the better.
For a nation trying to rebuild from years of conflict, it's slow and difficult. The blasts may echo far and wide. And broken windows are easier to replace than broken dreams.
Well, as you can see from these pictures, a lot obviously still needs to be done. Analysts compare rebuilding Iraq to actually giving birth. Now they say the country is in the stage of experiencing labor pains. The trauma burnt into the hearts of its people surely runs deep, but the cure is achieving freedom.